the first thing you're going to want to do is grab a trim piece tool and pry off this trim with it. You're going to put it between the headlight assembly and the center trim here. Pry gently, but firmly. If this has never been off before, it's going to be a little harder to get off than what you're seeing here. I've had this off quite a few times, but just be gentle and persistent, and it'll come off. Make sure you put it down somewhere where the paint won't get scratched, because that would be a bummer. Next, grab a 13mm socket. I need it to be about 6 inches long so it can get into this hole. It's pretty deep. It's also pretty dark and blind, so make sure you got a good look at it. These bolts are ferrous, and their cavity is open on the inside there, so if the bolt slips off the socket, it's going to fall down into an area that's impossible to reach. So you want to make sure that the tip that you're using has a magnetic insert, because that's going to help you keep that scenario from playing out. On the other side, it's exactly the same procedure. Just make sure you get a good hold on the bolt, crank it loose, and take it out. Now sometimes these are pretty tight, sometimes they're pretty loose, but you know, just make sure you're careful when you pull it out, because if the head gets hung on the trim piece here, it can actually get knocked out of the socket, so just guide it out gently. Opening the hood is easy, but not without risks. Open it slowly until you hear this, and then stop, or you could bend the hinge. Next, you'll want to pull back on this red tab here, and then push down, and remove the connector from the lighting assembly. Now, grab your cable, and if you have the Emblem extension, basically just straighten that out. Be careful not to bend it or snag it too much. And then take the male side of this connector, it's the one with the flat pins, and insert it into this connector. If it doesn't go, don't worry. There's a plastic piece in here that's purple that you got to push away from the pins. This one's already been pushed that way, so I can go ahead and insert it. It'll click into place, then you can reconnect the red clip there. This piece just inserts into the back of the housing. Next, you're going to want to grab a zip tie and attach these. I like using this channel in the connector because it ensures that the zip tie is not going to slip off. There's a lot of vibrations in a moving vehicle. So go ahead and get this connected to the original harness and snug it up. Alright, nice and tight. Grab your Emblem cable. If you bought the original version that was modified, it's going to be attached here. If you bought the version 2, there's going to be a connector you would plug into right there. You want to take this and route it behind this bracket. The important thing to remember here is that this area is not intended to be accessed, so the brackets can be sharp. Just make sure you're leaving plenty of slack in the cable. Make sure you're not cramming your hands anywhere that feels tight. This is actually pretty easy to reach though, so you shouldn't be any trouble there. Don't want to really touch anything orange, because orange is high voltage cable, so avoid those if you can. Once you get this routed, just kind of lay it back here, and you can go on to the next step. You're routing this cable, you want to run it behind this and attach it to this bracket. One thing you don't want to do is put it over this hole, because this hole is where this goes, and this can cut your cable. You could attach it to the top or bottom here. I don't think it really matters either way, but I'm going to attach it to the top. Grab a zip tie, run it through the bracket, and grab your cable. Go ahead and secure the zip tie. You want to make sure that the cable is flat against the bracket. You don't want to wrap it around this corner right here, because that corner can be sharp. Make sure it's flat against there. And in front of that, and you're good to go. The harness coming out of the driver's side headlamp assembly is where we're going to attach the next cable tie. This one is probably the trickiest one to get a cable tie on, just because it's tucked kind of back there. It's not too bad. Just make sure you're careful not to cut your hands on any of the brackets or anything back here. Next cable tie is going to go on the other side of this bracket, still on the headlight harness. Go ahead and secure that there. Next one is actually going to go on the factory emblem wiring. You want to make sure you leave enough slack here to keep a 90 in this cable, because you want to keep clear of this hinge. You don't want to get hung up in there. Grab your cable tie, secure it right here. The next cable tie is again going to secure to the factory emblem cable, but this one's going to be on the hood. Make sure it's over there. Grab your zip tie and secure it. Next, just for demonstration, I'm going to take off this felt liner. It's not a required part of this process, but it's pretty easy to do. The liner is held on with 8 of these clips. They're really easy to take off. You just want to grab the center of it and pull, and then just pull the whole thing out once you hear it pop. It's got this bit right here that just pops right out of the middle. Just grab it and pull. Every once in a while, they won't come off in one piece. That's perfectly fine. It's not going to damage it. I like saving this one for last because it holds the liner in place until you're ready to pull the whole thing off. Now that this is the last one, support the liner, pop this off, and then you should be able to pull the liner out. The path we want this cable to follow is basically here, under this bracket, up the hinge, around the hood, and ultimately to the Fisker emblem. This is where the emblem connection is. You want to go ahead and disconnect that. It's pretty simple. The connector has this little clip on the back. All you got to do is squeeze that and it'll pull right out. Make sure you're supporting the hood while you're doing this because you don't want to bend it. Next, secure the emblem cable to the factory emblem cable. Just make sure there's no extra slack in there. Use 2 or 3 zip ties for this. Next, you're going to want to attach your emblem cable. It'll plug in right here. The connector has this little clip right here, but you don't need to squeeze it to install it. All you got to do is make sure it's pointed to the back and slip it in there. Clips in really easily. Just make sure you're supporting the hood. Alright, give it a little press just to make sure. This, you can just sort of tuck in here. If you have an Extreme or a 1, I would definitely put some electrical tape on that just to make sure that it doesn't short out or anything. But for Ultras and Sports, that really shouldn't matter. You may want to do it just to be safe, though. Now we're going to put one final zip tie in place, just to kind of tidy this up a little bit. Put it right here in this corner, and then any slack that's left over after you put this in, you can just sort of tuck under that felt lining. Be sure when you're clipping these, you're holding the ends so they don't drop into the bay. Reinstalling the liner, make sure that these indentations right here are facing down. You also want to make sure that these 2 flaps that are sticking out of the back go into the frame of the hood on these 2 locations right here. When you're putting these clips in, it's important to make sure that the holes are centered up. The liner moves around pretty easily, but makes it a lot easier to get the clips in when it's centered. Once you get this first one in, it'll hold itself in place, and it doesn't really matter what order you put the other ones in. Get all your tools and trash out of here. Press the release lever before closing the hood. This is extremely important. If you do not do this, you will bend your hood. Make sure you and anyone else who's working on your car does this. Read this. Do this. This is the lever they're talking about. Press firmly on the release lever, push gently up on the hood until it clicks. Then you can lower the hood gently. Watch the hinge as long as you can to make sure that none of the cables are getting hung up in it. Next, go ahead and reinstall your hood bolts using your 13mm magnetic socket. The manual recommends 19 Newton meters of torque. I found that tightening them down as much as I can by hand is sufficient, but use your best judgment here. The center trim piece has 8 of these little spring clips that hold it in place. They match up with these holes in the front here. Basically just line them up and press it back on. Thank you for trusting me, and enjoy your mod.